Hello all, I'm the Film Bastard and welcome back. Hey, did you know that Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas was actually the second attempt to bring the work of Dr. Hunter S. Thompson to the big screen? In fact, the first attempt was actually 18 years prior in 1980. Instead of Gilliam, Depp, and Del Toro, we got Art Linson, Bill Murray, and Peter Boyle in a sight-gag-laden satire of the years immediately preceding and following Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. Without spoiling too much, it's a radically different film than what audiences were subject to in 1998. With that in mind, it's time to explore where the buffalo roam. Hey, look at that! It's original Ralph Steadman work. How hard was that, Gilliam? I mean, granted it's only credits, but at least the film doesn't set up the unrealistic expectation that the illustrations might actually be a living part of this universe. This screaming dingo here is Bill Murray's representation of Hunter Thompson. You'll notice pretty quickly how drastically different the two portrayals of the character are. But if not, this handy visual comparison will be sure to clear everything up. Well, that's about enough of that. After taking out a fax machine with a Callahan special, we're sent backwards in time to San Francisco 1968. Hunter's having a drug party with a nurse as he's writing a story, His Attorney vs. American Justice. And speak of the devil, here's Carl Laszlo, yet another pseudonym for Oscar Acosta, this time portrayed by Peter Boyle, who you'll probably remember as the best part of Everybody Loves Raymond.
You dumb bastard.
Laszlo crashes the party like Bruce Wayne if he forgot his batsuit, and he and Thompson beat a hasty retreat out the window. We cut to the offices of Not Rolling Stone, where Not Jan S. Wenner is demanding a story from Thompson that he owes the magazine. Thompson, as it turns out, is still writing the story, as we follow he and Laszlo into court, where Laszlo is defending every long-haired freak in San Francisco against drug-related charges. After a perceived miscarriage of justice and some disorder in the court, Laszlo is arrested. And before you can say Nixon, we're transported to Los Angeles in 1972, the home of Super Bowl VI.
Revolution and acid. What do you want to know? Where am I? Los
Angeles.
What year is it?
1972! Can't you read the Steadman credit? Whatever. F*** it. The weirdness involved with Thompson checking into a hotel room will seem familiar to longtime viewers, but in case this is your first video, he makes a bunch of weird requests to the front desk, spasms out a little bit, abuses a little person, then proceeds to trash the joint. The day of the game, Thompson is having breakfast when Richard Nixon shows up, God help us. No, it's actually Laszlo in disguise. He convinces Thompson to leave without actually taking in the Super Bowl, which leads to this exchange between these two characters.
You, fellas like football?
Say what?
I got a couple of Super Bowl tickets here I'm trying to get rid of.
Let me see. That ticket for that wine?
Good. Nice hat.
Oh, that is a beauty.
I like that hat.
Damn. Honkies, am I right? Another recurring motif is that of the ill-fated hitchhiker. While this guy's not as entertaining as Tobey Maguire, and never thought I'd say that in my life, he does have moments of mining pure comedy gold.
I think I'd like to get out pretty soon.
Oh. You don't want to get out around here.
Laszlo takes Thompson to a militant hippie compound that looks like it was decorated by Carlos the Jackal when Rojas shows up.
Rojas?
Yeah, Rojas.
Who is Rojas, you may ask? Why, he's the bastard love child of Carrot Top and Giancarlo Esposito if it had been raised by Rambo.
Laszlo, what kind of weirdness is that, huh?
Laszlo and Rojas take Thompson to an airstrip where there's supposed to be a gun run that's interrupted by the local PD, who has about as good aim as your average stormtrooper. After a nice dissolve, we're at UC Berkeley's Wheeler Auditorium for one of the many speaking engagements that Thompson gave around this time. It's at this particular engagement that he gave a roomful of college students his famous endorsement of drugs, liquor, violence, and insanity.
You know, I hate to advocate drugs or liquor, violence, insanity to anyone, but in my case, it's worked.
After the speaking tour, we're shuttled off to the 1972 presidential campaign. Unlike Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, which only took inspiration from one source, Where the Buffalo Roam is actually an amalgamation of inspirations, including some of the work of Oscar Acosta. But there's no doubt that the last half of the movie is dedicated almost solely to the spiritual sequel to Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, Fear and Loathing on the Campaign Trail 72. Thompson is kicked off of the press plane and told that he needs to ride with the roadies in the aptly named Zoo plane. George Carlin and Jerry Garcia are playing football in the aisles, David Baddiel is taking photos of nothing, and Christina Applegate is slugging Bud during the safety announcements. It's basically your average experience on any commercial airline. Thompson feeds some drugs to Harris from the Post, and the expected craziness of giving a square of drugs follows. Thompson hijacks Harris from the Post's three-piece suit and is shaving in the bathroom, when who should show up but Republican presidential hopeful himself, Richard Milhous Nixon. Now, I know that's not actually Richard Nixon, but holy shit, that's a real spooky likeness, isn't it? The two share some brief words in the bathroom before Nixon shares his domestic, foreign, economic, and immigration policies.
Fuck the doomed.
Thompson attempts to sneak back onto the press plane when from out of the sun-baked tarmac a white walker appears. Laszlo gets Thompson thrown off the plane, but not before there's a sequence that looks like it was lifted directly out of the original ending from Dr. Strangelove. After a little bit of pissing around on the runway, we fade back to Thompson's cabin. Thompson has a brief monologue ruminating about the presidency of Richard Nixon before he gets his dog liquored and the credits roll, leaving everyone in the theater a little bit more confused than when they arrived. So that was Where the Buffalo Roam. Honestly, I prefer this movie to Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas for a number of reasons. The characters are still weird, but they're endearing instead of off-putting. The locations are varied and interesting, and the story, while not nearly as complex as Fear and Loathing, is still really accessible to a wide audience. But just because it's the better of the two films doesn't mean that it isn't without its problems. Actually, Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas and Where the Buffalo Roam are the complete antithesis of one another. Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas had a point, albeit a misguided one, whereas Where the Buffalo Roam seems to be completely devoid of a point other than to be an 80s comedy. Another way that both movies ended up suffering was in its portrayal of the leads. On the Criterion Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas commentary track, Hunter Thompson laments Benicio del Toro's portrayal of Oscar Acosta because he seemed like nothing more than a drugged-up slug. But in this film, you sort of have the opposite problem. Likewise, in Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, Johnny Depp is a Muppet gone off its strings, whereas in Where the Buffalo Roam, Bill Murray seems completely disinterested with everything around him. He doesn't even seem affected by all the drugs he manages to take, and we see Murray's Thompson ingest far more drugs than Johnny Depp's did. Neither movie really managed to strike a balance between these two characters. You only got one polar extreme or the other. I think Where the Buffalo Roam's biggest strength lies in its spatial relationship to the source. Remember, Buffalo came out in 1980. The world was freshly removed from the herd of Nixon, and at best, the film was set 12 years after the events actually took place. Fear and Loathing, on the other hand, was shot 27 years after the original source text. Where the Buffalo Roam had a kind of built-in audience, whereas Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas relied far too heavily on the crutch of nostalgia. What I haven't mentioned during either of these reviews is the reliability of the source author. Hunter Thompson was a sharp-minded drug fiend, but he was a drug fiend, and so everything he wrote had to be taken with a grain of salt. Did he really, for instance, have an interview with Nixon in a bathroom? Probably not. But like all good legends, the twisted tales of Dr. Hunter S. Thompson aggrandize themselves over time, and it makes them that much more fun to tell, and it especially makes them that much more fun to see on the big screen. Actually, speaking of that, a lot of you have been kind enough to remind me that, to date, there have actually been 3 fiction films based on the life and work of Dr. Hunter S. Thompson. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm the Film Bastard. And as always, until our next review,
Sic Semper Cinema.